Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks a lot for this briefing. Mr. Miliband, you'd mentioned this high-level panel on humanitarian financing, and one of the proposals that it has was to listen to beneficiaries more. Listen more to beneficiaries and include them in decisions that affect them, or participation revolution. So I'm wondering, what's going to be the input of not just NGOs, but actually of kind of beneficiaries of aid? Do each of you favor, for example, a UN Freedom of Information Act, where information requested by the public, beneficiaries or taxpayers, as you mentioned, would have to be released, whereas currently there is no such requirement? And I just wanted to ask about a particular situation, which is the case in Yemen, where you have the same country that's actually leading the airstrikes is the main, or in some say only, but major donor to the humanitarian campaign. So many people there see it as kind of a strange, should there be some standards? Is there some problem with the country that's doing airstrikes in Sadr and Sana'a and elsewhere, also presenting itself as the major thing? And for Mr. Miliband, last thing, you were the foreign secretary during the Sri Lanka issue, and as you probably know, the UN pulled its humanitarian workers out of Kilinochie and elsewhere in the north. And I wanted to know, is there anything in this summit that's going to be kind of either self-critical or reflective of how, on the UN side, both the commitment to stay and transparency on when one leaves, and do you have any reflection on that?
Let me start the difficult questions are for David, but on the first overall question about transparency and beneficiaries, this summit happens after, I guess, 2 years of preparation and consultation, worldwide consultations, and the European Union contributed to setting up the sort of European branch of this consultation. I think this is very important. That's the way the Secretary General wanted it to be, and we support that. I think, and as I said, there is an effort for all actors in this process: the donors, the beneficiaries, and the implementers, if I, in my bad English, define them. So they all have to come together. This is not a donor summit. It should not be a donor summit. This is a summit that brings all the different actors. And secondly, this is a summit which is a stakeholder summit as well, if I understand correctly the preparation, and thousands of people will be there. A number of roundtables and discussions will take place. And we very much support that. We believe that development policy, humanitarian policy, and the linkage between the two is one of the central issues in policy making these days in the world. And in order to be successful, it requires the full participation, the input of the beneficiaries. Again, as we say in our different papers, this has to be people-centered. It's not us diplomats or bureaucrats, or for that matter, the leaders of the civil society organizations, to decide what people need. If we don't address people's needs, we are missing the point. And so we support transparency, participation, consultation, particularly on the side of beneficiaries.
Thanks for the good questions. On the first part, I mean, we have been very focused in the last 2 years on actually delivering services, not on being able to participate in detailed regional and other conferences. It's important to say that. And I think that your question raises a vital issue of where accountability flows in the system. Does it all flow upwards to donors and to taxpayers, or does some of it flow downwards to the real clients, customers, beneficiaries, which are the people in need? And my answer would be that it needs to flow in both directions, and that the best thing that organizations like mine can do is not to invite beneficiaries to summits, but to develop our programming in a way that really builds in client voice and choice into the programs that we run. So, for example, we are running pilots of customer satisfaction surveys for beneficiaries around the world to see whether that's a way of getting some client voice. I hope the UN does. The UN infrastructure is going to have to find ways to bring beneficiaries to the summit or bring their views to the summit. But our focus is, as an implementing organization, is very much on the way our programs listen to beneficiaries. And the truth is, we've got to do a better job. Secondly, we are active in Yemen, but not funded by any of the combatants in the conflict. And obviously, this relates back to our discussion earlier about the responsibilities of parties in wartime and the way in which they facilitate humanitarian access and humanitarian support, which is a matter of responsibility. Now, we're an organisation that is funded by globally by governments. We're not reliant only on private donations, and I think that it's incumbent on us to be very transparent about that. And to be very clear about the responsibilities that we think exist, not just for us, but also for those who are donors and are combatants. And that really relates to your third point, which is that I think that transparency can be painful, but in the modern world it's essential. And I think that applies to all organizations. I don't know the particular act that you refer to, so I'm not across the details of that, but I think that the principle of transparency is a very important one, and I would guess, I haven't studied it enough, but I would hope anyway, that the candidates who are thinking about the position of the UN Secretary General are building into their pitch or their pitches the idea or the fact that over the next 5 years the demand for greater transparency is only going to grow, and so I hope that their ideas for increasing transparency are going to be part of the discussion over the next period. Because of course, as well as having summits, we've got important decisions being made about appointments to key bodies, never mind elections in the US and elsewhere. I mean, I spoke out very strongly on the Sri Lanka situation in 2008 and 9, and when I travelled there. And I think the issue that you raise of the risk appetite of different parts of the humanitarian system is obviously made very difficult by the first discussion we had, which is whether or not international humanitarian law is being provided. And I always say to people that whenever they attack the UN, they've got to look at the pictures and of UN staff shepherding desperate people out of sniper alleys and other war zones, because those are the values of the UN that are being put into practice by UN staff in the most heroic way, never mind in association with NGO staff. So I think that the risk appetite is one that needs to be maintained, but it needs to be maintained in a way that doesn't give a pass to combatants in conflict, because then we're not doing justice to the people who we're employing.